So I think now's a good time to shift over to Stephanie. So again, I'll welcome, as I mentioned before, Dr. Stephanie Warner. She's Manager Knowledge Engagement at the University of Calgary. I'm sure many of you know her as well, who will be speaking to us about the development of the Knowledge Engagement Impact Assessment Toolkit at their institution. And Stephanie, welcome. Thanks so much. And I'll just pass it on to you and let us know if Betty and I can help you in any way as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for the opportunity to share today. Since we're recording, I'll just say I hope that my Monday brain is up to the task of being recorded and having my presentation disseminated, but I know you're all a very kind group. So yeah, as mentioned, I'm at the University of Calgary, so also on Treaty 7 territory. And I'd like to just chat a bit today first about what knowledge engagement is as our unit. Some of you will have seen this toolkit or seen this presentation before, but I'm hoping with a bit of an introduction, we can then have more of a discussion about kind of how this could be used or how your offices are doing this. So the knowledge engagement team is really a support unit for knowledge engagement initiatives at the University of Calgary. So I wanted to start with just, what is knowledge engagement? And this is a term that was really coined as an umbrella term back in 2013. And it's really got a focus on relationships and partnerships. So you'll see that it has some components that are similar to things like knowledge mobilization, but with really that larger focus on relationships. So we define knowledge engagement as a dynamic and reciprocal process in which multiple stakeholders come together to address mutually identified problems. The purpose of this deliberate engagement is for the co-creation, synthesis, and application of knowledge and evidence to benefit the community at large. So we are a team that's housed within research services, and we have a broad mandate to build capacity and knowledge engagement, facilitate the development of partnerships for research, and provide a robust support structure for these initiatives, meaning we work with researchers or community organizations who want to create a research partnership. And we do also provide supports for things like knowledge mobilization. And there's a really large focus on the idea of impact as well. So that's a central tenet to what KE is making a difference in the communities that we serve. And we define that in our research plan back in 2018 as the new knowledge we create through cutting edge research results in societal impact and leads to positive change in our local, national, and international communities. So probably similar to a lot of our kind of campus community engagement offices that have that research focus, but the real question is like, how do we then assess the impact of those connections or those relationships? And this led to the creation of this knowledge engagement impact assessment toolkit. So this is a project that was funded through the Future Skills Centre Canada, as facilitated by Research Impact Canada, in which we are a member. And there were two main deliverables associated with this knowledge engagement impact evaluation framework project. So we were going to select an appropriate framework and develop a tool that could be used by researchers, and also create some digital training products or a video series that would help us to build capacity and promote the use of the framework and tool. So the way the project worked was that there was a student hired, her name was Gertrude Samar, and she went through and with the support of a committee, researched and reviewed impact evaluation methods, models, and tools to select an appropriate framework. They went through a lot of different impact assessment frameworks, and it needed to be responsive to needs that were communicated by the campus community. So there were surveys done in 2015 and 2020. It also needed to be responsive to those principles of what knowledge engagement is and priorities that were identified by a stakeholder steering group. So they did look through a number of different models, everything from logic models and knowledge mobilization pathways to impact, the knowledge to action cycle, the research excellence framework out of the UK, but they decided on something called the REAP framework. So REAP is an acronym, which you can see here on the screen, and it's out of the University of Bradford in the UK. So the REAP self-assessment framework has four main components: reciprocity, meaning that there's a multi-directional flow of knowledge, information, and benefits between the university and the community partners. Externalities is basically the same as reach, that there's benefits that extend beyond those created for the partners, and that these benefits contribute to social trust and relationships and building a learning and knowledge-based society. So big picture things there, but also have some key indicators in those areas. Access, that the partners have ongoing access to facilities, resources, and knowledge instead of just receiving a one-time provision of goods or services. And partnerships, that partnerships develop and are strengthened through extended reciprocity and access. So there's kind of these 4 key components. Some of the strengths of this, it is also used by a couple of other units at the University of Calgary. So that is a contributing factor to choosing this framework. It's used by the community engagement team in our Office of Advancement and also in the experiential learning space. But the other side of this is that it's adaptable, but has a consistent form for evaluating knowledge engagement. And what came out of this was a toolkit that was released in 2021. And you can download the toolkit and learn more at ucalgary.ca/ke-toolkit. And I can put that in the chat as well as soon as I can find the chat. I'll paste the link here. Nope. Just a second. Apparently I copied and pasted something else after that. So just give me 1 second here. There you go. Excellent. So the toolkit was released in 2021, and it has 2 main components to it. So it has a matrix, which is an Excel spreadsheet that uses weighted impact indicators related to those 4 categories of REAP, as well as a category on strategic context. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. It has some core components that are locked, that are really central to the idea of knowledge engagement and to the REAP framework, but there's other indicators that can be modified. And this can be used at different life cycle stages of a project. So it could be used at the planning stage, the monitoring stage, or the end impact assessment. There's also an assessment portrait, which is a Word document that uses a series of prompts to get into the narrative of what the impact was. So it has some guided questions and categories that helps people to tell the story of the activity, the initiative, project, or program, whatever you choose to apply this thing to. It comes with a PDF usage guide that walks you through how to do this step by step. And there's also that website that has a few short videos that were recorded to talk about, what is impact and then why this REAP framework was chosen. And a key piece here is that the assessment is intended to come either from the shared space of that partnership, that campus community partnership, or from the community perspective. It's ideally not used just from the researcher's perspective, but should be used with the idea of impact and benefit to the communities that we're trying to serve, right? That idea of serving the community. So I'm just going to take you first to what the website looks like. So if you go to that URL, you'll come to our landing page here, which is also accessed from the Knowledge Engagement Team's website. It tells you a little bit about why this is important, that combination of quantitative and qualitative indicators. It talks about what is the REAP self-assessment model, has a, how to get started, watch the videos, then download the toolkit, then assess, then maybe attend a Q&A session or talk to us. You can see the videos there, and if you keep scrolling, this is actually how you access the toolkit, and it should automatically generate an email to you that will give you that package of information with these different resources. And you can also contact the KE team if you wanted if you had any questions. So that's primarily indicated for researchers at the university, but if anyone has other questions, reach out anytime. And so what does the matrix look like? So the matrix is actually an Excel spreadsheet. And what you see is that there's these different, in the columns, there are the different impact indicators. So I know it's on an angle and tough to read because it's small, but we can look into these as we go. Each of those indicators has a weighting. So some of these, if they're in bold, they're locked and you can't change the indicator itself nor the weighting. But some of them, for example, enables dialogue to engage community. That is one that you can change either the indicator itself or the weighting of it. So the way it's organized is difficult to scroll because it's got this really big column or this really big row at the top. But it goes through reciprocity, externalities and reach, access, partnership, and then strategic context. And you would put your your activities into a row, and then you would do a self-assessment in each of these different categories. So you'd first say, am I using this for planning, monitoring, or impact assessment? And then you would weight each of these different impact indicators. So for reciprocity, there's only one, and it's weighted as 5, and it says mutually beneficial exchange of knowledge and resources. Let me try and just scroll down or zoom in a bit here. And this one is actually a list. So it gives you the option in terms of reciprocity of deciding whether this is more like giving information or a full-on collaboration. So this is the only category that has descriptors for the different like 1 to 5 scores. In things like externalities and reach, you see things like promotes engaged research and scholarship, enhances trust by creating shared and ethical spaces, affects change in the target sector, and is inclusive of diverse ways of knowing and doing. The optional ones here enables dialogue to engage community, facilitates capacity building of students and trainees. You can build in whatever you like. You could make those higher weighted if you want. In access, supports ongoing, open, and accessible access to knowledge is the only locked component. There's also takes work off campus and into the community and promotes ongoing and shared access to resources. And again, you would do a self-assessment and score yourself. It's fairly subjective here. So that's why you really want to either do this with your partner, have your partner do this, or you could at least try and think from the perspective of your community partner. In partnership, it could be cultivates new partnerships, strengthens existing relationships, or supports internal collaboration. And in strategic context, aligns with institutional plans, strategies, and priorities, and responds to external expectations and commitments. Once you've filled all these in, it will automatically calculate a weighted impact score. And then it tells you just based on the categories that were defined in the toolkit, whether this is a low, moderate, or high impact activity. So it will automatically populate that. It does have some extra columns. And again, you can modify this however you like: number of stakeholders, number of partners, influencers, knowledge users. So you can actually capture some information here if you wanted to use this in a more ongoing way. Once you've gone through and done this more quantitative assessment, you would then move over into the portrait portion, which is the Word document. And it's a 2-page document that you can fill out. And I'll just zoom into this, but I wanted to give you the overview here. It's got some general information that you can fill in as you're going. So, you know, the date, who is it prepared by, in what faculty or department. There's a summary, the objectives of the activity. Let me just zoom in so that you can actually see this. What were the objectives of this knowledge engagement work? The assessment of impact. So this really just links it back to that matrix and says, what was your weighted impact score and what level of impact did you have? But then it really prompts you to say, what are your reflections on this? What do you think about this weighted impact score? What are your reflections on assessing impact, on the knowledge engagement journey itself? It also goes into the assessment story. So digging deeper into each of those categories. So anything that's notable that you would want to bring forward about reciprocity, the reach, the access, the partnerships, or the strategic context. So building out those narratives that can then be used in maybe a tenure and promotion document, or maybe in an institutional report. So just really encouraging people to get into that reflection piece. It also has what factors affected your outcomes, opportunities, or challenges, which really lets you look at some of those external contexts as well, like what got in the way, what would we do differently next time, and then the future potential of this. How will this inform future knowledge engagement work? Because really these partnerships and partnered research, partnered initiatives, they're never a one size fits all, and we always learn so much throughout the process. So a given project might evolve quite significantly over the lifetime if you were to do this portrait at the planning stage and like say what your intentions are and then come back to it at the monitoring or end of project stage. You can really start to see how things have evolved throughout the lifetime of the project. And it also has prompts to maybe include links to relevant content, photos of events, reports, copies of knowledge products, memorable communications, quotes, relevant materials from stakeholders, partners, influencers, or knowledge users. So for folks that maybe aren't as comfortable or familiar with telling that kind of relationship impact story, this really tries to walk them through what information might be interesting to a reader or a listener about the impact of this. So I'll just pop back over and close off kind of this walkthrough here before we get into a description or into a discussion, sorry. But the idea here is really that you can add those additional impact indicators. Ideally, they'd be co-created with community. Like what really matters to you in terms of the outcomes or the impact of this work or this initiative. And there are some provided alternatives in the usage guide as well that you could pull from. And the portrait you can change however you like. It's free license, like you're welcome to do whatever you like with this if you would like to use it. We've heard of people kind of pulling pieces of it to evaluate a grant program that they ran that was a community engaged type of grant. So really just using it as the bones and to tell whatever story you would like. So if you'd like to learn more, feel free to reach out anytime. I can put my email in the chat as well. And you can learn more about our team as well at our website, ucalgary.ca/knowledge-engagement. So thank you so much. It was a pretty quick overview of that.
Thanks so much for that, Stephanie. That was great to see. And thank you for walking us through that as well. That was good to see the, what's being displayed and what might be modified and all that. I just thought we'd take a moment now for questions for you. I suspect there'll be some questions about it. So I think Matthew, I think you've got your hands up. Oh, you're clapping. Okay.
I was just
sorry.
I was just saying thank you very much, Stephanie. Appreciate the presentation.
Thanks.
Well, that's great. Does anybody have any questions? They want to put their hand up? Oh, hi, Rihanna. Go ahead.
Hi. Sorry. Hi. Thanks so much. I really appreciated that, Stephanie. I'm just curious, and I know some colleagues on the call here have participated with the Carnegie classification. So I'm wondering, like, one, is UCalgary part of that? And if so, how does that interact with that process? And then if not, is this sort of a supplementary or a substitute essentially for that? And if you could speak to those both a little bit, that would be really awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I will do my absolute best to speak to that. So I've been the manager of the knowledge engagement team since November of 2021. So I'm inheriting a lot of this really great work and absolutely cannot take credit for it. So a lot of this was done by my predecessor, McKinley Darlington, who's now at Athabasca. Many of you know McKinley, she's fabulous. So we were part of the initial Canadian pilot. We were one of the pilot institutions. Right now, there was a team that was part of that. Susan Mead-Kiss, who's now at University of the Fraser Valley, Penny Pexman, Karen Benzies, and Leslie Reed were kind of our main folks. In the last year or so, since Susan's departure, we haven't been as active with Carnegie, but we are still hoping to be part of the next phase of the Canadian classification. We're not like one of the leads on that, but we would want to be part of that. So it's been a little bit of a pause as there's been some kind of shuffles in portfolios and things like that. But our team is very deeply connected with how that will roll forward. And a lot of the Carnegie kind of best practices and partnerships in terms of reciprocity and shared and ethical spaces and mutual benefit really do inform what knowledge engagement does and how the toolkit would be used kind of within that context. So I know that's a bit of a wishy-washy answer, but yes, they are informing one another. And they would have been ongoing around the same time. And a lot of the folks that were part of the development of the toolkit were also part of the Carnegie conversation. So I think there was just a really good flow of information between those two. So they wanted to be as aligned as possible. Byron?
Stephanie, you can go ahead and see if you see any hands up and
okay, cool.
let people know.
Byron. Hi.
Hi, thank you so much, Stephanie, for your well done presentation. I'm very curious to know a little bit more about how the tool and if you use this tool for external partners outside of the campus, and if you do find any limitations with the tool internally or externally.
Yeah, and honestly, I think the majority of the work was done in the development and the rollout of the toolkit. What I haven't done as much is actually pushing this forward in my first year in this team. So I think we've lost a bit of momentum in terms of really using this with our community. And I will honestly say another piece that I haven't been as involved in right now is following up. There's been hundreds of downloads of the toolkit, but we don't have a good sense of how people are actually using it. They're not really coming forward and giving us feedback or asking questions. We know a lot of people download it, but we don't actually know, other than a few anecdotes, how they're using it and whether it actually is speaking to their needs. So I think that really has highlighted for me in the last couple of months, especially, that I think we have some evaluation and some follow-up to do in terms of checking in with people who have downloaded the toolkit to see if it is usable. And if it's not being used the way it's kind of intended to be used, what can we do better? I think a lot of the language still is very researcher centric. Like, it has a lot of the more like academic-y type words to it. So I think we could also maybe socialize that a little bit more, or think of ways to have those conversations with our community engaged researchers. So thanks. It's a great question, but I don't have enough of an answer for you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Am?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for that presentation. It's really useful, having gone through a bunch of academic conferences related to community engagement. There's usually 3 or 4 panels around assessment. How do we do this? And everyone's got a real kind of specificity to the city they're working in, or the context or department they're working in. And the sessions always end up thoroughly inadequate, or there's just more questions left. What I like about this tool is its adaptability. So that part of the design, I think, is really useful. And I think, as we continue in conversation, we can share what all of us are working on. And I don't think no one tool is going to ever work fully, but I think being in conversation and communication is really useful to adapt to our local context. But thank you for that.
Thanks. And I will say, just on that note, yeah, research impact it's such a large topic across so many different spaces, or just impact assessment in general. And the other thing our team does, the University of Calgary signed the Declaration on Research Assessment, or DORA, which really encourages looking at broader outputs of research. It looks at how we assess research and its impact, and it looks at, are we considering societal impacts? So my team is also responsible for implementing DORA and what that means for our research assessment practices. So I think conversations like this, how do we talk about impact in spaces that are not as like traditional scholarly outputs? What does that look like, and what could we be doing differently? I think that's where this tool will start to come into its own as well. Matthew?
Yeah, thanks very much, Stephanie. I just wanted to make a couple more quick comments around the Carnegie Community Engagement Classification. SFU has been a co-presenter of that work together with others, and there's been, as you mentioned, a good group of 13 to 16 sort of active Canadian institutions in that pilot process. As you stated, there's really excellent connection, I think, between some of the values associated with the Carnegie Community Engagement Classification and how the knowledge engagement impact assessment toolkit is described. But just to provide a bit more information, I would say that the Carnegie Community Engagement Classification, and we are bringing one forward for Canada, so there'll be a Canadian version of that available to everybody. That classification is really about encouraging institutional transformation in how institutions manage and take care of their partnerships. And from that point, that classification is really designed to gather information about how institutions are aligning their institutional infrastructure to enable and facilitate community engagement work across the institution. So when I think of the knowledge and engagement impact assessment toolkit, that could be one really excellent way of showing how an institution is working to really systematize and build these types of tools into their infrastructure and kind of contribute to the transformational change at their institution in that way. So I just wanted to kind of make that comment to align the two a bit further. A lot of the language that's used across both are very similar with respect to reciprocity and mutual benefit, supporting partnership, co-creation, and really focusing in on research, teaching, and learning to make sure that kind of work is embedded in the partnership work as well. So just wanted to make that comment. But thanks so much for the presentation. It was a great one. And Susan Meekus is great at the University of the Fraser Valley, and I've been in touch with Leslie Reed as well, and we are continuing that work with the University of Calgary. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Vanessa?
Hey, Stephanie, thanks so much for that presentation. It was echoing everyone's comments, was very useful to kind of listen in on just some of the work that you guys are doing. I'm just curious, like, you know, I know this is really meant more for researchers and faculty at this time, but just kind of curious what that process looks like, you know, when you're evaluating some of the research that's being proposed. Are you and the team essentially mandating upfront for folks to think about, you know, their work with this in mind? Like, you know, is this being shared with them, you know, kind of midway at the end of their projects? And just kind of what is the commitment to them filling it out? I know you mentioned earlier that it's a little bit difficult to know who's been using this assessment tool and the toolkit, but just wondering like how you're getting some of that feedback loop at the, you know, for you and the team.
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, it's just sparking ideas and thoughts. So there isn't a formalized requirement to use this. Right now, it's provided as a tool in terms of we really want folks to be thinking about knowledge engagement, planning ahead for impact, really being thoughtful about partnerships rather than, you know, at the last second going out to a partner and asking for participants or a letter of support or something like that. So really trying to build in that sense of like, what is a meaningful partnership? And this is a tool that can help you plan for more meaningful partnerships or, you know, build that into your processes. But it has not been incorporated in any core way into even internal pieces. But that's a really good question because we are continuing to think about how are we assessing research impact and, you know, in what spaces is this happening? Could it be something that provides a structure, you know, as faculties are starting to talk about like updating faculty guidelines to include things like DORA, it could be a space of saying, here's the tool that's recommended. I think mandating always comes with a bit of sensitivity for sure in an academic space. So I don't know that there would be full-on buy-in yet across all faculties and spaces for something like this that is very relationship driven and not as focused on the outputs of traditional outputs of research. But I think there's a lot of appetite for it and a lot of interest in it. So I wonder if it's just worth like piloting it in something internal and kind of getting that happening. But that's a great question. I've written a note for myself to be like, okay, someone else across Canada has said we should do this. So now I have like, have a little bit of impetus. David?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Stephanie, for that. And Susan Mead-Kiss had shown us that a couple of years ago, but that was a very full explanation of the spreadsheeting and everything else. So it's good to see. Thank you for that. When Susan Mead-Kiss spoke of it previously, it almost felt like it was sort of an internal management sort of document which would adjudicate different kinds of community engagement arising from different elements of the university. So one could almost see it, the scores allocating to how you would distribute a certain amount of research dollars or something like that for that purpose. And you probably could work that way well. probably most of the people on this call are not so much interested in that, probably closer to the community side. And, you know, with these things, there's always the danger of building the tools which come to then be used against us in some ways. But you'd mentioned the hope to maybe do some co-construction with community partners, but it strikes me that this is much more of an internal adjudication of the quality of community engagement without necessarily actually asking the community partners what they think has been impactful. So I'm just wondering, is this more of an internal sort of document to, you know, rank internal qualities of community engagement, or is it designed more to try and pick up what is the most impactful forms of engagement in community?
I think the goal is for it to be more the latter.
Mm-hmm.
But depending on how it's framed or who is the person doing the assessment, it could easily be simply an internal tool to, you know, pat oneself on the back and say, we're doing really impactful work. There is there are continued kind of prompts throughout to say this should be done from a shared space or from the community perspective. So ideally, it is something that you would either, the researcher, if we're looking at a research and community partnership, the researcher would fill it out from their perspective, but the community partner would also fill it out from their perspective. So I know that where Susan Mead-Kiss was before was in our community engagement team in the advancement side. And I know community engagement does use the REAP framework still, and they have implemented a way of doing it where they have, like, they do an internal assessment, but they do have that partner score them as well. And they look at the connection between the numbers, right? They look at, I don't know if they average it or if they look for disparities or agreement or if they like more qualitatively, but they are using it from those two lenses. And it has to be from both. It can't just be from one. And that would be the ideal use of this, is either coming from the community perspective or being used in collaboration. Yeah.
I was just wondering, building on that, Stephanie, if I know you were saying earlier that you haven't always been able to sort of gauge how people are using it and all of that. But I'm just wondering, have you gotten any indication from community partners about maybe opportunities to co-create here, or is that still something that you're hoping to get information on?
I haven't personally, but I think it's also because I came in like a year into the development of the toolkit. I think I came in a bit late. So I don't know. I haven't heard too much about it, but I also know that it had fallen down the list of priorities for me in terms of really making this something that we were having consistent conversations about. So might have been a bit of a missed opportunity to kind of keep that momentum going, just given the turnover in the team at that point where the toolkit was just kind of gaining momentum. But I think, yeah, I think there's still opportunity for that. But and yeah, Sorel is also on the knowledge engagement team. She's the knowledge engagement specialist. Maybe she can speak to that as well.
Hi. Yeah, so I work with Stephanie here at the University of Calgary. I'm relatively new as well to both the tool and the team. But I do think there was one example that came up from the Office of Sustainability on campus that was kind of an interesting conversation. So they do a lot of work with students and researchers on climate-related research and have internally some granting processes, and had sort of integrated the REAP assessment toolkit as part of that. So how they're asking both researchers to evaluate their own work, and then I think internally as well, using it as an evaluation tool. But I might throw it back to Stephanie because she might have a little bit more familiarity about how that relationship came to be. So we're seeing it pop up in different areas, but yeah, the tracking piece on a wide scale has been a challenge for sure.
Oh, and there's been kind of a mix of who's downloaded it. I just did a very rudimentary look at, who's a UCalgary address, an email address versus a personal or external email address. And it's lots of other institutions, because I know Research Impact Canada has also been sharing the toolkit and wanting to share it with their network, because it was like funded and supported through the Research Impact Canada network as well. So we've had some reach that way, but again, just not, I think, not enough good engagement with community partners about how this would fit with their needs and their priorities.
Mm.
So I think lots of
Yeah.
opportunity.
I can certainly understand that. That's the ongoing wish
I
and the
know.
ongoing challenge. Yeah.
We have to walk the talk, and that's my challenge
Yeah.
always, is that we're kind of within the university, so kind of like marching to the internal piece, but our offices are all geared towards connecting meaningfully with community. So we do need to be the ones that step up and do that. I don't want to take up all of the airspace, though. I feel like we
Steph,
should.
here's
Yeah.
a question from the chat.
Yeah.
When you decided to move forward with this tool, did you require approval from senior management or a governing body to pursue it with your team? Have you had any momentum at the senior level for adopting it as a formal assessment within the research portfolio?
Yeah. I know that there was definitely a lot of momentum at the senior level. Our vice president research has a public health background and is very, very pro impact assessment. And I think is a large part of the reason that we have, a knowledge engagement team and and the DORA signing DORA, really a focus on research impact assessment. So I don't know what approvals were required. I'd have to get back to you on that because I wasn't part of that process. But I do know that there was an advisory committee and an implementation committee for knowledge engagement. And part of the mandate of that was developing tools for evaluating knowledge engagement activities. So it does align with things that had senior leadership on them. And our team kind of dotted line reports up to an associate vice president of research. So we do have that leadership level oversight, and they are very, very pro on this knowledge engagement toolkit and would like to see it being used more than it is. We don't have a formal or mandated assessment of research impact at UCalgary yet. There are institutional impact reports that are generated. There's, the individuals like tenure and promotion and various spaces that we evaluate research impact, but we don't have anything that's like a framework that everyone has to use. There are conversations about if we had an impact assessment framework, what would it look like? And I don't know if this one captures enough of the diversity of impact that a university would see to be used on its own, but I could see it being used as maybe a component of research impact. If you were assessing the impact of, an engagement, a partnership, could this be, because at the whole university level, we definitely come into conversations about like, what about impact on like policy? What about innovation and entrepreneurship and spin-offs and all those pieces? Like, what about all the other ways the university can have economic impact? And what does that look like? So I think this would be part of the conversation. I just don't know how it would fit with the rest of it. But I know that that conversation is actively coming in the next few months about what research impact assessment would look like across the university. So again, it's a to be continued. What about others? Again, it's 12:20. I think we only have 10 more minutes. What are others using for assessing community engagement or the impact of community engagement? Are there other tools, other resources? We
And
tend to
Betty,
see, sorry, go ahead.
All I was going to say was, Betty, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat, for those of you who have things to share, please feel free to write them in the shared Google Doc as well. But yeah, Stephanie, I think it's great that we're taking the hour to discuss this. There's clearly an interest, so please do feel free to go ahead.
And everyone, make sure to grab this link and think about it and take your time and add the information, because we will share this out with the notes when we send you an update.
I have a question, and this is for everyone. I'm wondering if anybody has an impact assessment approach that they feel really good about. Like where they're like, yeah, this really aligns with what we're trying to achieve. It doesn't take too much of our time. We're not just speaking to our comms team. So I would love to hear if anybody has some tidbits of that they would like to share that are inspiring for them, or if maybe it's a radio silence like none of us do. I think that's a really interesting place where we're at as well. But just want to put that out there.
Anybody?
I can just jump in and share. I wouldn't call it impact assessment so much as that we do know kind of internally inside the university, the information they're looking for, or particularly external funders in particular. And so, numbers of public events, who's attending, we try to take a look at, the public events. Do we have gender parity, equity, diversity, inclusion? All of those pieces, I think, are kind of doing, but it looks much more like an annual report from a nonprofit than it would be impact assessment. As we get to a 5-year or 10-year mark, we're doing different levels of engagement that probably would be closer to some sort of a qualitative study. But given the amount of time that it takes, I think to your point, when we're looking at doing evaluation, we want to be able to pull together information that's not actually taking away from our core work. And oftentimes we're so stretched as it is to be spending that time on evaluation doesn't seem to be the best way to spend it. So I think that is really the question of how to be able to gather the data, qualitative and quantitative, in a way that doesn't take away from the core of the work.
I think access to data is something that plagues us all, especially if we're asking different questions now than we were a couple of years ago. Michael.
Thanks a lot for the presentation, Stephanie. I'll mention briefly that this summer I want to work to pilot an impact assessment case study framework that's really predicated around what happened in the UK through the Research Excellence Framework. So Rhianna, about your question around, how comfortable and confident and nimble, it's like, yeah, it might be none of the above, but we'll see how it goes under that liberating notion of a pilot. I'm going to cherry pick some stories and collaborative efforts that are many years old to get a sense of the depth of the outputs and outcomes, and if there's any impact to tell, and really work with an evaluation specialist to try and build that car while we drive it, make it a little bit more nimble, a little bit more operational, with a goal of being able to get some broader institutional buy-in around this. So it should be a fun summer, but we'll see how it goes. Actually, I really appreciate that filter, Rhianna, because I'd love to feel comfortable and confident with it by the time I get to Labor Day. So here's hoping.
Michael, you'll have to let us know how that turns out.
Gladly. Yeah.
There's a comment in the chat from Karen Nelson. We did a study impact assessment on our research shop, and the questions are modified onto an end of project survey for partners, soon to be created for students. And Karen's included a link if you'd like to take a look at that for some information on that as well.
Great. And I think we're going to be hearing more in the months to come from Karen on the study, etc. So that will be great to hear. I just see another message has come in, so I just want to make sure.
Oh, that's just me saying I covet the research shop.
No, that's lovely. I just wanted to make sure we're capturing any comments or questions here. I see another one here. Oh, someone shared as well in the chat. I don't know, Betty, if you wanted to read that one out as well.
Sure, I was just taking a look and I see that everybody's a little bit busy on the spreadsheet too, or the Google Doc.
Oh,
so
great.
Thank you very much for that. Community Engaged Scholarship Institute at U of G, this is Kendra, have been experimenting with how best to balance the numbers, metrics-based impacts that we share with upper administration on campus with more narrative-style stories of impacts that feature some of our projects and our partners. And she's included a link as well. Yeah, really interesting because, of course, ultimately, you want to be able to look at the impact, but there's also that second piece where you need to be able to show senior leadership what that impact is. You need to be able to translate that in a way that is understandable and clear that the work that's being done does have an impact. So that's a really big component of it. No question about that.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm wondering about is, and I'm just bringing up that document that I think people are adding to, is if people have questions about, what they'd like to learn more about, as we get to these final few minutes of the session. Yeah, and a general comment there, how effective our efforts are to both the community and the institution. As some of us have been mentioning before, that is a primary desire, primary goal, obviously to be creating impact in community in meaningful ways. And it'll be, I know within CC Canada here, we're always thinking about that, of course. And it'll be great to share as the months go on, stories of impact potentially, for community, and how we can think about those and potentially build on those impacts, as we continue with this work. I had noticed, Stephanie, the comment about, in terms of that REAP model, thinking about ongoing access. And that to me is very interesting as well. How might impact be created at the time of a project or a partnership, but how might that be an ongoing thing? And how might there be ongoing benefit to community, building on that momentum? So that's something we're always thinking about for sure. And I'd love to hear from others as well, if they have great stories to share.
Access is such a core issue in the research space, especially because so few community partners have access to those publication databases, for example, and they're not in accessible language. So I'm just sharing something, I don't remember if I've shared this previously, but a newcomer research library that's been designed by a number of different partners, but it's designed to provide like community-based knowledge, including like publications in kind of lay format. So you can see what research has been done on newcomer communities before you go to these organizations and say, hey, I want to do this study. You can see if maybe a study exactly like that was done just recently.
Wonderful. And I'm just seeing, Betty, I don't know if we see any other comments or questions. If we don't, maybe I'll wrap things up at the moment. I see we're ending. Do we see any others? Any other hands up?
Well, looks like we're okay. I've grabbed the links that people have provided in the chat so that we could share those out as well, so people can take a look at those later on. And don't forget, this document that we've put up is active, the Google Doc. So think about it a little bit and come back to it when you want and give us some thoughts. We'd really appreciate that. I think everybody here is getting so much from learning from each other that it's really helpful to see what you're doing or what you're thinking about, what your concerns are and your challenges.
Yeah, and so Stephanie, thank you so much. Obviously, this has been a really interesting discussion. We've been able to share some thoughts around it as well, and I know I'll certainly be looking more at the toolkit, and anything we can do to help share, promote that toolkit or spread the word about it. We're very happy to do that. So this comes to the end of our hour. We hadn't had a chance really to do much networking, but we did have a chance to really share ideas. So I'm so glad we were able to do that. And I think the hour was filled out really nicely.